It was my son Ethan's 40th birthday, and I had spent the entire week preparing. I had arranged for a lavish dinner at his favorite restaurant, a surprise that I knew he'd enjoy. I bought him a sleek new laptop, a gift he'd mentioned needing for months, and made sure the dessert came from the bakery he swore by. I even went the extra mile to have it delivered with a card that read, "To my wonderful son who deserves the world." Ethan had always been the apple of my eye, even as a child. I loved him with every fiber of my being, and I made sure that every sacrifice I made, every penny I earned, went toward making his life better. I never asked for anything in return, just his love, his company, and his happiness. That was enough. I knocked on his door with a smile, holding the cake, the laptop, and a bouquet of his favorite flowers. The excitement that bubbled inside me was something only a mother would understand. This was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment I could show him how much I cared. When Ethan opened the door, I was taken aback. Instead of the joy I had expected, I was greeted with a cold stare. His eyes, once full of warmth, were now distant, and his lips were set in a tight line. "What are you doing here?" he muttered, his voice low and dismissive. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," I said, my smile faltering. I held up the cake and flowers, hoping to break the tension. "I've got your favorite dessert, and I thought we could celebrate a little." Ethan didn't even glance at the cake. He sighed, his shoulders slumping as if carrying an invisible weight. "We need to talk, Mom," he said, stepping aside and gesturing for me to come in. His tone was sharp, impatient. I hesitated, but I couldn't stop myself. I entered the living room, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't the celebration I had envisioned. It felt like a storm was brewing, and I had no idea why. We sat on the couch, the air thick with an uncomfortable silence. His pristine home, the one I had helped him buy a few years ago with a hefty loan, suddenly felt like a foreign place. The space between us grew as I waited for him to speak. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my gaze. "Mom, I've been thinking a lot about my life lately. About everything I've got and everything I don't. About what really matters." I nodded, eager to listen. "Of course, darling. What's on your mind? If you need help with anything, just let me know." He gave a bitter laugh. "I don't need your help anymore, Mom. I've been doing some thinking and I've come to a conclusion. I've been holding on to something that's been dragging me down for years." I froze, my stomach churning. What was he talking about? "I don't need you in my life anymore, Mom," he said, his voice hard and cold. "I need you to go." The words hit me like a slap across the face. I couldn't breathe. What do you mean?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm done with you, Mom. You've done enough. You've given me everything and I'm grateful, but now it's suffocating me. Your constant calls, your visits. It's too much. I need space, I need freedom, and you're not the one who's going to give it to me." The room felt like it was spinning. I looked down at the cake, the dessert I had so carefully chosen, now a symbol of my failure. The laptop, the flowers, the money I had spent. It didn't matter. It was all meaningless to him. "How can you say that?" I managed, my voice cracking. "I've given you everything, Ethan. You're my son. You don't know what it's like to love someone as much as I love you. I've worked my whole life for you, for us." "I know," he interrupted, his voice dripping with condescension. "And that's the problem. You've given too much, Mom. It's been about you, your needs, your desires. I've been a puppet and you've been pulling all the strings. I need to cut those strings now. I'm not a kid anymore. I'm an adult and I need to live my own life." I sat there, stunned, my heart shattered into a million pieces. "So this is it? After everything, you just want me to disappear?" "Yes," he said, his voice unwavering. "I want you to disappear. And I need you to do it now." I stumbled out of his house, the cake still in my hands, the flowers forgotten on the floor. My mind was racing, my body numb. I had just been told that the love I had poured into him for the past 40 years meant nothing. The walk back to my car felt like an eternity. The street seemed unfamiliar, the world outside of Ethan's home a blur. All I could think about was his words. His anger, his contempt. What had I done wrong? What had I missed? I drove home in a daze, the tears falling freely now. I had given everything for him, worked myself to the bone, made countless sacrifices, financially, emotionally, physically. And in return he wanted me gone. I couldn't fathom it. I couldn't comprehend how it had all gone so wrong. When I finally made it to my apartment, I collapsed onto the couch, still clutching the cake. The realization that I had been used, manipulated, and discarded so easily was overwhelming. My phone buzzed on the table, but I didn't bother to check it. There was nothing left to say. I had been replaced, forgotten. The son I had raised, the son I had sacrificed everything for, didn't need me anymore. And worse, he didn't want me. The days that followed felt like I was walking through a fog, unable to see clearly or find my footing. Ethan hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't even bothered to check on me. I spent hours in my small apartment staring at the walls, the same walls that had once felt like a sanctuary, a place of peace. Now they felt suffocating. The cake sat on the counter, untouched. The laptop, still in its box, remained on the coffee table, a reminder of the gift I had so eagerly picked out for him. I thought about returning it, but then I remembered that it didn't matter. Nothing mattered anymore. I couldn't understand it. I had always been there for Ethan, his rock, his guide, his safety net. When his father left us, I became both mother and father, doing everything I could to provide to make sure he never went without. I worked late shifts at the hospital, put off my own dreams to support his. I didn't have the luxury of time or a social life, but I never complained. I had one goal: to give him a better life than I had. And now this. My mind raced as I thought about all the things I had done for him over the years. The private school tuition, the car he'd driven to college, the down payment on the house he'd bought with his wife just last year. Everything, every penny I had saved, I poured into his happiness, his success. And for what? So he could tell me he didn't need me anymore? I paced around the apartment, my hands shaking with frustration. The guilt started to creep in. Was I too overbearing? Had I smothered him with my love? I thought about calling my sister, but what could I even say? My son hates me? No. I had to figure this out on my own. That evening, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. As I strolled through the neighborhood, the familiar streets I had walked with Ethan countless times felt foreign. I passed by the park where he had learned to ride his bike, the ice cream shop where I had promised him a treat after his first school recital. It all seemed like someone else's life, someone else's story. I walked until I found myself at the pier, overlooking the water. The setting sun reflected off the rippling surface, casting a warm, golden light. The quietness of the place should have calmed me, but all I could hear were Ethan's words echoing in my mind. I need you to disappear. I sat on a bench, burying my face in my hands. How had I gotten here? What had I done wrong? My phone buzzed in my pocket, breaking my thoughts. I pulled it out, hoping for some relief, some sign that Ethan was reaching out. But it was a message from my ex-husband, Daniel. We hadn't spoken much since our divorce 5 years ago, but I had never expected to hear from him now. The message was short, but it hit me like a punch in the gut. I heard from Ethan today. He's angry. He told me about your birthday. I don't know what happened, but you need to fix this. You're pushing him away. I stared at the message, my heart sinking even lower. Even Daniel, who had walked out of our lives all those years ago, could see it. Ethan was slipping away from me, and I had no idea how to stop it. I texted back, the words shaky on the screen. What do I do, Daniel? I don't know what I did wrong. I've given him everything and he just wants me gone. The response came almost immediately. I don't know, but you have to talk to him. Don't let this go. He's hurt and you're hurt. But you can't fix it if you don't try. I dropped my phone back into my bag, not sure whether I felt angry, sad, or simply defeated. Talking to Ethan? After everything? Was there even a way to reach him? How could he be so cold? So indifferent to the woman who had given him her everything? I stood up, the weight of everything pressing down on me, and made my way back home. But as I approached my building, I noticed something that stopped me in my tracks. There, standing outside the front door, was a man I didn't recognize. He was tall, with dark hair and a suit that looked far too expensive for this part of town. He was talking to my neighbor, Mrs. Patel, and she seemed agitated, her hands gesturing wildly. Curious, I approached, trying to remain unnoticed. But as I passed by, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. Is Mrs. Grant home? I need to speak with her, the man's deep voice rang out. It's urgent. Mrs. Patel's reply was softer, but I could hear the tension in her voice. She lives on the second floor. But I don't know what this is about. You're asking for Mrs. Grant. I froze, the name ringing in my ears. Grant. My maiden name. What was going on? I moved a little closer and the man saw me. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It felt more like an interrogation. Mrs. Grant? Julietta Grant? he asked, his eyes narrowing as he studied me. I nodded, hesitant but curious. Yes. Can I help you? I'm Agent Thomas from the bank. We need to discuss some matters regarding your son's finances. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest. What do you mean? Is there something wrong with Ethan? Agent Thomas looked uncomfortable, as if delivering this information wasn't easy for him. We've received some concerning reports. It seems your son Ethan has fallen behind on his mortgage payments. We need to discuss your involvement as his co-signer. I stared at him, my mind racing. Ethan's mortgage payments? He'd been so proud of his new house. He had promised me everything was fine. But now, this. Mrs. Patel, sensing my distress, stepped forward. Ethan's been having problems with money? She asked. Agent Thomas hesitated but then nodded. Yes. And we've been trying to reach him. But his payments have stopped, and as his co-signer, it's likely that you'll be held responsible for the outstanding balance. My mind reeled. I had helped Ethan with the down payment on the house. I had co-signed the mortgage, believing he was on solid ground. But now, this. Was this another way for him to distance himself from me? Or was it something more? The agent handed me a business card. We need to discuss this as soon as possible, Mrs. Grant. The next step is for us to assess the situation with you directly. I took the card, my hands trembling. I'll call you tomorrow, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. As Agent Thomas walked away, I stood there, my mind consumed with worry. First, Ethan rejects me, then I find out he's financially struggling, and now the bank is involved. Was this how far his resentment had gone? Was I the last person he would turn to for help? But as I looked down at the card in my hand, something stirred within me. If Ethan wanted to push me away, if he thought he could do this on his own without consequences, he was mistaken. I wasn't going to let him fall apart, no matter how badly he'd hurt me. Tomorrow I would face the truth. Tomorrow I would find out exactly what Ethan was hiding from me. The morning after meeting Agent Thomas, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread gnawing at me. I had spent hours tossing and turning, trying to come to terms with everything that had happened. Ethan's rejection, his cruelty, the sudden financial troubles I had never been told about. All of it seemed like a cruel twist of fate. How could I have been so blind? The agent's words echoed in my mind, each one more disturbing than the last. We need to discuss your involvement as his co-signer. That wasn't a mere formality, it was serious. I had signed on the dotted line, agreeing to take responsibility if Ethan couldn't meet his obligations. But now it felt like that decision was slowly unraveling everything I thought I knew about my relationship with him. I decided to call Agent Thomas first thing in the morning, hoping to get more clarity about what was going on. I dialed his number, and after a few rings he answered. Agent Thomas. His voice was calm but firm. It's Julietta Grant. You came by my building yesterday to speak with me about my son Ethan. I'd like to discuss this further, I said, my voice betraying my nerves. Of course, Mrs. Grant, he replied. I understand this is difficult. If you'd like, we can meet at our office to go over the details. Would it be possible to meet here in my apartment? I asked. I'd rather not leave until I have more answers. There was a brief pause on the line. Certainly. I'll be there in an hour. I hung up the phone and sat down at my kitchen table, my hands gripping the edge, trying to steady myself. How had things come to this? Was Ethan's life truly in turmoil, or had I just been blind to the cracks beneath the surface all along? An hour later there was a knock on my door. My heart skipped a beat as I walked toward it, trying to appear composed despite the storm inside me. I opened the door to find Agent Thomas standing there, his suit neatly pressed, his expression serious. Mrs. Grant, he greeted, offering a polite nod as he stepped inside. Please have a seat, I gestured toward the living room. I hadn't cleaned up from the previous night. Cake and flowers still lay on the counter, remnants of the failed celebration. Agent Thomas took a seat across from me, placing a folder on the coffee table between us. I appreciate you agreeing to meet. I know this must be a difficult time. I nodded, taking a deep breath. I don't understand what's going on. Ethan's always been responsible with his finances. Why would he be in trouble now? What exactly are you saying? He opened the folder, pulling out several papers. Your son's mortgage payments have not been made in several months. There's a substantial balance left on the property, and unfortunately, the bank has already initiated the foreclosure process. I felt like the ground beneath me was slipping away. Foreclosure. I whispered, struggling to process the information. But Ethan was so proud of that house. He told me everything was fine. That's the thing, Mrs. Grant. From the looks of it, he hasn't been forthcoming about his financial situation, Agent Thomas continued. There's more. The bank found that his credit lines were maxed out, and there are signs of increased debt accumulation over the last year. This was all before the missed payments on the mortgage. A sick feeling settled in my stomach. I didn't know any of this. He never said a word. How could he keep this from me? Many people in these situations do. They don't want to admit failure or embarrassment. He likely hoped he could fix it on his own without bringing it to your attention, Agent Thomas said, his voice tinged with sympathy. But given your status as a co-signer, we need to act quickly. If the foreclosure goes through, the bank will seek to recover the debt from you. My breath caught in my throat. You're telling me that I'm financially responsible for all of this? For the house, the debt, everything? Yes, he confirmed. The total amount due is approximately $450,000, including the mortgage and accumulated interest. If the bank proceeds with foreclosure and the property is sold, any remaining balance would likely fall to you as the co-signer. The weight of his words crushed me. $450,000. How was I supposed to come up with that kind of money? The savings I had worked my entire life to build, savings that I had imagined would carry me through my retirement, were now at risk, all because my son had hidden the truth from me. I never should have co-signed, I murmured, my voice shaking. I thought I was helping him. I thought he was stable. I understand this is overwhelming, Agent Thomas said gently. But at this stage it's about protecting your financial interests. If you want to avoid liability, we'll need to act fast and determine your next steps. You have options, but you'll need to move quickly. I nodded, my mind racing. I needed to figure out what to do, fast. But more than the money, more than the mortgage or the foreclosure, it was Ethan's betrayal that stung the most. How had he let it get this far? Why hadn't he come to me? Why had he chosen silence and shame over asking for help? As Agent Thomas continued explaining the details, I could barely focus on his words. I was too consumed by the realization that my son, the child I had given everything to, had kept me in the dark while he made reckless decisions. He had lied to me, and now he was dragging me into a financial mess that I couldn't afford. Finally, after what felt like hours, Agent Thomas gathered his papers. I'll leave you with the documents, he said, standing up to leave. Take your time to review them. We'll need to meet again in a few days to discuss the next steps. Please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions in the meantime. I nodded, too numb to say anything more. I walked him to the door, but before he left, he paused and looked at me one last time. I know this isn't easy, but remember, you're not alone in this. We'll help you through it. With those words, he left, and I stood in the doorway, staring at the empty space he had just occupied. The weight of what he had said settled heavily on my shoulders. Ethan had put me in this position. He had dragged me into his world of lies and secrecy, and now I was the one who had to clean up the mess. But even more than the financial burden, there was a deeper pain, a loss I couldn't fully comprehend. The son I had raised, the son I had sacrificed for, had become a stranger to me, and I wasn't sure I could ever find my way back to him. I took the documents from the coffee table and flipped through them slowly. The weight of each page felt like it was suffocating me, but I couldn't focus on that now. I had to figure out my next move. I had to decide whether to save Ethan, or save myself. The days after Agent Thomas's visit were a blur. My thoughts kept returning to the same question. How could I have been so blind? Ethan's debts, his lies, the weight of the financial burden now resting on my shoulders. It felt like a nightmare from which I couldn't wake. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the realization that Ethan had never trusted me enough to ask for help. That after everything I had done for him, he had kept me in the dark, assuming I wouldn't understand, or worse, assuming I wouldn't care. The truth cut deeper than the financial situation ever could. I spent that night in a restless haze, staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together everything that had happened in the last few months. Ethan's coldness on his birthday, his refusal to even look at the cake I had brought him, his decision to push me away so effortlessly, it all began to feel like a pattern. I hadn't noticed before, but now looking back, it was as if he had been pulling away little by little for years. He was always busy with work or with his wife, Julia. But I had never seen it for what it really was: a slow, steady erosion of our relationship. The fact that he had hid his financial problems from me for so long, that he had allowed them to spiral to the point of foreclosure without once reaching out for help, only solidified that my role in his life had changed without my even realizing it. I picked up the phone and dialed his number, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again, but there was no answer. "Ethan," I said softly, leaving a message. "Please call me back. I don't know what's going on, but I need you to talk to me. I need to understand." I hung up, staring at the phone in my hand, willing it to ring. But it didn't. The silence was deafening. The next morning I decided to take action. I couldn't let this go on any longer. I had to know the truth. Not just about the money, but about Ethan, about us. I wasn't going to sit back and let him destroy himself, and I sure as hell wasn't going to let him destroy me in the process. I pulled out the bank documents Agent Thomas had left me and went over them again, this time with a different mindset. The mortgage, the debt, the missed payments. There was nothing left to do but face it. I needed to know what steps I could take to protect myself, and how I could help Ethan without enabling him further. I spent the morning on the phone, first with a financial advisor, then with a lawyer. There were options, difficult ones, but options nonetheless. I could work with the bank to negotiate a repayment plan, but it would require me to take on the majority of the responsibility. Alternatively, I could look into refinancing or even selling the property. But none of that mattered if Ethan wasn't willing to face reality and confront the mess he had made. By the time afternoon rolled around, I felt mentally exhausted. I had spent hours trying to navigate the labyrinth of options, but the emotional toll was far greater than the financial one. Each step I took toward resolving the situation felt like I was digging deeper into a hole that might never be filled. I was just about to call it a day when I received a text message from an unknown number. "Mom, it's me, Ethan. I need to talk to you. Can we meet?" I read the message twice, disbelief flooding my chest. Ethan. He was reaching out. After everything, he was finally reaching out. I quickly typed a response. "Yes. Please. I'll be here." A few minutes later, I heard a knock at the door. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, and there he was, my son, standing in front of me, looking as weary and defeated as I felt. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept in days, and there was a hardness to his posture, as if he were bracing himself for something. "Mom," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, gesturing for him to come in. "Of course, Ethan. Please, sit down." He walked into the living room and sat down, his hands clasped tightly together in his lap. There was an awkwardness between us, a chasm of hurt and unspoken words. For the first time in years, I didn't know what to say to him. "I don't know where to start," he said, looking down at his hands. "I've messed up. I didn't mean for it to get this bad. I didn't want to drag you into this. I didn't want you to know because I was ashamed." "Ethan," I interrupted softly, my voice trembling, "I'm your mother. You don't need to be ashamed. You could have come to me. We could have figured this out together. I've always been here for you." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with guilt. "I know, and I should have. But I didn't want to admit how bad it had gotten. I thought I could fix it on my own. And when I couldn't, I just kept pretending everything was fine. I didn't want you to worry." The words stung, but they also brought a sense of relief. He was finally admitting the truth. Finally opening up, even if it was too late. "Why didn't you come to me sooner, Ethan?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why didn't you trust me enough to ask for help?" "I don't know," he said, shaking his head. "I guess I thought you'd be disappointed. I thought I could handle it on my own, that I could prove to you that I was capable." His words, though laced with sincerity, hit a nerve. My heart ached with the realization that, in his mind, I was no longer a source of support. I was a figure he felt he had to live up to, someone he had to impress. "Ethan," I said, sitting down beside him, "you don't have to prove anything to me. I've always been proud of you no matter what. But you need to understand that you can't keep hiding from your problems. They won't go away, and neither will I." "I know. I'm sorry, Mom. I've been an idiot. I should have asked for help. I didn't know how to." His voice cracked, and I could see the tears starting to form in his eyes. The sight of my son in pain, vulnerable and broken, was almost too much to bear. For a moment I just sat there, unsure of what to say. But then something inside me snapped. I had spent years worrying about him, sacrificing for him, giving up my own happiness for his. But this wasn't about him anymore. It was about me too. You're not alone, Ethan, I said quietly, taking his hand in mine. You never were. I've always been here. And I will continue to be, but you need to make things right. You need to take responsibility for your life, and you need to start being honest. Not just with me, but with yourself. Ethan nodded, tears now streaming down his face. I don't know if I can fix this, but I'll try. I swear I will. For the first time in a long while, I saw a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Maybe, just maybe, we could start rebuilding from here. But even as I sat there with him, holding his hand, I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were consequences to his actions. And while I might forgive him, it would take more than words to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. We had a long way to go. But for the first time in a while, I felt like we were on the same path again. And that was a step in the right direction. The days following Ethan's visit were filled with a strange, tentative sense of calm. After so many months of silence and heartache, we were finally speaking openly again. But even as we began to rebuild the fragile thread of our relationship, I couldn't shake the gnawing feeling that things would never be the same. Trust, once broken, was difficult to mend. Ethan came over the next few days, explaining more about his financial situation. It was worse than I had imagined. Not only was his mortgage in default, but his credit cards were maxed out, and his business, which he had started a few years ago, was struggling. Despite the facade he had put on for so long, pretending everything was fine, his world had been falling apart right in front of him. I should have told you sooner, Ethan admitted one evening as we sat in my living room, the dim light casting long shadows on the walls. I didn't want to disappoint you. I didn't want to be a failure. I could see the shame in his eyes, and it hurt more than I could express. I wanted to tell him that he hadn't failed me, that all I ever wanted was for him to be happy and honest with me. But the truth was, I wasn't sure I could help him now, at least not in the way he wanted. I just don't know where to start, he said, rubbing his forehead. I've messed everything up, and I don't even know how to fix it. You're not alone, Ethan, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the uncertainty I felt. We'll figure this out. But you have to be honest with me from now on. No more secrets. No more pretending. Ethan nodded, but I could tell he wasn't fully convinced. He was still hiding something. There was more to his financial troubles than he was letting on, and I could feel it in the way he hesitated, in the way he avoided certain topics. The longer I thought about it, the more I realized. Ethan was still in denial, still unwilling to face the full consequences of his actions. I spent the next few days researching options: debt consolidation, refinancing, bankruptcy. I spoke with financial advisors and even tried to contact the bank to see if there was any way to delay the foreclosure process. But the reality was grim. The bank wasn't willing to negotiate. Ethan had missed too many payments, and there was no easy way out. The foreclosure was moving forward, and I couldn't stop it. I tried not to let it show, but every time I thought about the possibility of losing the house, a wave of guilt washed over me. I had co-signed the mortgage, believing I was helping my son secure a future. But instead I had put myself in a position where I could lose everything. It wasn't just the money, though. It was the emotional toll, the years of sacrifice, the love I had poured into Ethan's life. I had given him everything, and yet it felt like I was losing him all over again. He was a stranger to me now, a man I barely recognized, and it scared me. Late one night, I sat at my kitchen table, the papers scattered in front of me. The weight of it all felt unbearable. The thought of having to pay off Ethan's debts, the possibility of losing my own savings, my apartment, everything I had worked so hard for, it was all slipping through my fingers. I had done everything for him, and in return he had kept me in the dark, left me out of his struggles, and now I was being dragged into his mess. I rubbed my eyes, trying to focus on the numbers, the options, the next steps. But there was a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I stood up, my heart racing, and walked toward the door. It was past midnight. Who could it be? I opened it, and there, standing on the threshold, was Julia, Ethan's wife. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She looked worn out, like she hadn't slept in days. "Mom," she said, her voice cracking. "I need to talk to you." I stepped aside, letting her in, but my heart was already heavy with dread. What was she doing here? And why now? We sat down on the couch, an uncomfortable silence hanging between us. Julia had always been polite, reserved even, but tonight she seemed different. There was a vulnerability in her that I hadn't seen before. "I don't know what to do," she said, wringing her hands in her lap. "Ethan, he's not himself. And I don't know if I can help him anymore." "Julia," I said, my voice soft. "What's going on? You've been quiet about all of this, about Ethan's situation. Why didn't you come to me sooner?" "I didn't know how to," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "I didn't want to drag you into this. But I can't keep pretending that everything is okay. Ethan's sinking and I don't know how to save him." I could hear the frustration in her voice, the helplessness. She loved Ethan, I knew that. But I also knew she was tired, worn down from years of trying to make it work. The stress of his business, his finances, and now this, everything had become too much for her. "He's been hiding it from me for so long," she continued, her voice trembling. "I tried to talk to him, but he won't listen. He says everything is fine, and then I find out about the foreclosure, about the debts. I don't know what happened to the man I married, Mom. He's not the same anymore." I sat there, taking in her words, feeling the weight of her pain. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than she was telling me. Ethan's finances, his refusal to open up, his distance from both of us, it all felt like a carefully constructed wall. "I don't know what to do," she said again, tears welling up in her eyes. "We're losing everything and I don't know how to fix it." I reached out and took her hand, squeezing it gently. "You don't have to fix it alone, Julia. You've never been alone in this. If Ethan won't come to me, then I'll go to him. We'll figure this out together." She nodded, but there was a sadness in her eyes that I couldn't ignore. "I don't know if he'll ever come back to us, to me. I don't know if I can forgive him for everything he's hidden from me." The truth was, I didn't know either. But I wasn't going to give up on him, not yet. I couldn't. Ethan was my son. He was still the little boy I had raised, the boy I had loved so fiercely. I couldn't abandon him now, not when he needed me most. Even if it meant sacrificing everything I had, even if it meant facing the worst of his choices head-on. Julia left shortly after, her face still clouded with worry, but there was a faint sense of relief in her eyes. She was no longer shouldering this burden alone. But the next few days would be the true test. I had to face Ethan, confront him about the truth, about everything. And this time there would be no more lies. No more pretending. No more secrets. It was time to make him understand that family was everything. And if he wanted to fix what he had broken, he would have to face the consequences of his actions. The days after Julia's visit felt like an emotional avalanche. My resolve to help Ethan was firm, but I was beginning to realize that no matter how much I tried, I could not control the outcome. I couldn't fix him. I could only offer him the chance to face his mistakes. And that was something he had to do on his own. I spent those next few days alternating between phone calls with financial advisors, revising documents for the potential sale of Ethan's house, and staring out the window, my mind wandering. The calmness of my apartment, the familiar sights of my neighborhood, offered no comfort. I was consumed by the tension in my chest, the worry that this was all beyond saving, that the son I had devoted my life to would slip further away from me. But I had to try. I had no choice. I reached out to Ethan again, this time through text. "Ethan, I need to speak with you. Please come by, we need to talk." His response came hours later. "I'll be there in the morning." I spent the evening preparing myself, running through everything I wanted to say, everything I needed him to understand. I knew this conversation could break him, or it could be the catalyst for the change he so desperately needed. When he arrived the next day, the tension between us was palpable. I watched as he stepped into the apartment, his eyes avoiding mine, a look of guilt and confusion swirling in them. He still hadn't fully accepted what he had done to get to this point. He hadn't truly understood the depth of the damage he had caused, not just financially but emotionally. "Mom," he began, his voice low, "I don't know what you want from me. I know I've messed up. I know I've ruined everything. But I'm not sure how to fix it." I stood up, the weight of everything I had been holding back threatening to spill over. "You're not just ruining yourself, Ethan. You're ruining us. All these years I've been the one picking up the pieces of your life. And I never once asked for anything in return. But now I need to know if you're going to keep hiding or if you're going to face this, your mistakes, your responsibilities. Because right now, I'm the one who's left holding the pieces." His face twisted with emotion, but he didn't speak. "Ethan," I said, my voice firm but laced with sadness, "this isn't just about the money. Yes, the mortgage is a mess. Yes, there are debts piling up and I'm stuck with some of them. But what about the trust? What about the years I've spent raising you, pouring my love and my resources into you? You kept me in the dark for so long, and now when it's time to fix things, you expect me to just clean up your mess. I'm not doing this alone anymore. The silence that followed was suffocating. Ethan's eyes were glassy, but he couldn't bring himself to meet my gaze. Instead, he turned his eyes toward the floor as if searching for an answer in the patterned rug beneath us. Mom, I'm sorry, he finally said, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry for everything. I never meant for things to go this far. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't know how to stop. You have to face the consequences of your actions, Ethan, I said, my voice growing softer. No one can fix this but you. I've already sacrificed too much. I've given up my future, my comfort, just so I could support you. But I'm not doing that anymore. He looked up at me, a tear slipping down his cheek. I don't know if I can fix it, Mom. I don't know if I'm strong enough to make things right. You don't have to be perfect, I replied, moving closer to him. You just have to be honest with me and with yourself. I'm not asking for miracles. I'm asking you to stop running away from your problems. For a moment I thought he might pull away again. But instead he reached out and I felt the warmth of his hand grasp mine. It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. I'll try, Mom, he said, his voice shaking. I will. I'll do whatever it takes. The days that followed were slow, filled with difficult conversations and long, tear-filled talks about our past, about everything that had gone wrong between us. Ethan and Julia worked together to create a plan to pay off the debts. We had to sell the house, but even that didn't feel like a loss. It was a painful but necessary step toward healing. We went through his business finances, seeking advice from experts. Ethan had to admit that his business model hadn't been sustainable, that he had let things slip out of his control. But there was a spark of determination in his eyes that I hadn't seen before. For the first time in a long time, he was ready to face the truth. He wasn't the same man who had walked into my life with empty promises. He was a man ready to take responsibility for his actions. But it wasn't just about money. The emotional work, the rebuilding of our relationship would take much longer. It would take patience, trust, and time, things we both had in short supply. One afternoon, as we were sitting down to go over the final details of the debt restructuring plan, Ethan looked at me, his eyes soft with regret. Mom, I don't know how to thank you. I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that I will do everything I can to make things right. I smiled, though my heart was heavy with the weight of it all. You don't need to thank me, Ethan. You're my son. You always will be. But I need you to understand something. You can't keep running away from your mistakes. You can't hide behind excuses anymore. And I won't let you. I know, he replied, his voice steady now. I know. As time passed, Ethan and Julia worked through the financial mess, step by step. They sold the house, paid off what they could, and started over. It wasn't easy, but the process of rebuilding was a journey they had to take together. And in that journey I was there, watching, supporting, but no longer carrying the weight of it all on my own. There were still tough moments, of course. There were moments when Ethan faltered, when old habits crept back in, but each time he came to me with honesty and vulnerability. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And I could see the man he was becoming. Someone who understood the value of responsibility, of trust, and of the people who loved him. As for me, I had learned a painful lesson. Love, no matter how unconditional, could not be used as a crutch for another's failings. I had spent so many years giving up my own dreams, my own happiness, in an effort to make Ethan's life easier. But in the end, I had to live for myself too. Months later, I found myself sitting at the same kitchen table, the one where we had once sat, broken and lost. But this time there was no uncertainty in the air. There was only the quiet satisfaction of knowing that we had come through the storm, together. Ethan stood at the door, ready to leave. He turned to me, a grateful smile on his face. Thank you, Mom. For everything. I smiled back, my heart full of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Go live your life, Ethan. You've earned it, I said, my voice steady. And with that he walked out the door, ready to begin the next chapter of his life. And so was I. What would you do if the person you loved betrayed you but you still wanted to help them change? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced a tough choice like this? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories.